Hello and welcome back to Ross Taylor Woodworks. This time we've got a nice quarter sawn Mission Arts and Crafts desk, roughly 1900 or so. The base is in pretty good shape, but the top has some water staining and the glue joints are coming apart. So the top is going to need some work. Now on the base, just do some cleaning. I haven't quite decided whether just to do a waxing or maybe do a recoat with shellac or something. I'll decide after I clean it. See what it looks like after it's cleaned. Now the drawer front, there's a spot here that's going to need some touch up. And it's got some nice knobs on it. Okay, I've got it flipped over and I'm going to start taking the screws out. There's quite a few screws around the edge. I first started with the drill, but I couldn't quite get a grip on the screws and just switched to a regular screwdriver. Okay, I've got the joints all cleaned out. Scraped the edges and got in there with the sandpaper and cleaned all the glue out of the groove. Now it's like a tongue and groove joint. Now when it was attached to the desk, only one joint was completely loose. But I did test the joints, put it in the bench vise and just kind of bent the top a little bit, and one joint popped apart. So I've got that one right here test fitted. I'm dry clamping. Now I'm only going to glue one joint at a time. I'm going to glue this one first. Then once that's set overnight, I'll glue the other one. It's very difficult to line up these two joints at the same time. I've got it clamped with blocks on top and bottom to get it lined up. And got the bar clamps in here. And it's fairly tight, except for right in the middle here, which I can do a little filling. Okay, I unclamped it after about 3 hours. I decided it was safe to unclamp it. I left the alignment blocks in place. Now I'll just repeat the same procedure on the other joint. Now on the other glue joints, they were just slightly separated, but they weren't loose. So I'm going to put some cyanoacrylate glue down in the joints. I'm using the thin cyanoacrylate, and it wicks itself down into the joints. And I'll wipe off the excess and use the accelerator. Okay, to reinforce each joint, I decided to put some splines on each glue joint. These will be completely hidden once the top is reinstalled. These are just regular biscuits, and then I trim them off flush. Now I'm getting ready to sand the finish off the top. Just to demonstrate how much of a warp there is, there's kind of a cup in each direction. I can straighten this out later. And each individual board has a slight cup to it. So I'm just going to go after it with some 60 grit paper and get the old finish off the top. As stated earlier, each individual board that the top is made of has a slight cup to it. So I'm going to make some passes across the grain try to level out the cup in each board and try to level the whole top out. Okay, after finishing with the 60 grit paper, there's quite a few black stains. There was a big white stain right here, but that's disappeared. So I'm going to have to do something about these big stains. So I'm going to try some bleach. I'm going to mix up a 2-part bleach and treat it with some bleach. Okay, I brushed on the bleach. I'm just going to let that sit for a few hours. After sitting for a few hours, the stains are a little bit better, so I'm just going to neutralize it with some vinegar. Okay, I did a little more sanding. I went up to 100 grit on with the orbital sander. Stains are much better. The bleach worked out pretty good. And I did some rough sanding on the edges. I'm going to finish cleaning them up then. Now, before I do any more sanding, I want to get the top clamped down onto the base. I want to get it reattached to the base because it has a pretty good cup to it. I don't want it sitting unattached for very long. Okay, let's back up a little bit. While I was working on the top, I got the base cleaned. And before I cleaned it, I took off the little stub tenons that stick out. They're just decorative. And I'm going to mark them where each one of them goes. And this is just the usual process of TSP and warm water and a little scrub pad. And gave the whole base a thorough scrubbing. Actually ended up going over it twice. Okay, I've got the top lined up and I clamped it in place. I'm going to install the screws on one side only at this time. Then I'm going to take a clamp on the opposite side and pull the top flat. And then reinstall the screws on that side. Okay, while working on other parts of the desk, I worked on the drawer as well. The drawer bottom has a split. Now I'm first going to take the drawer apart, take the knobs off. There's one nail holding the drawer bottom. And I'll slide the drawer bottom out. Now the rest of the drawer bottom was stuck in the groove, so I just tapped it a few times on the bench, and the whole drawer kind of fell apart. Now I'm just going to glue the drawer bottom back together. There's 2 splits. Make sure everything gets lined up properly. Then a little bit of clamp pressure. Then wipe off the excess glue. Then I'll reassemble the drawer. Check it for square. Now there's one little hole in the drawer bottom. I just filled that in with some wood putty. Okay, I've got it flipped back over. There's a couple spots that need filling. So I'm just going to fill it in with some wood filler. Now I'm going to continue sanding with 120 grit paper. Now on one side of the desk here, there's some small paint spots. I'm going to take a razor blade and try to get those spots out of there. And I decided to do a light sanding with some 220. I'm just going to go over the whole base with just a light pass with some 220. After finishing with 120, I'm not quite happy with the top. I'm going to do one more pass with the bleach before I do the final sanding. And it's the same procedure as before. I put the bleach on, I let it dry for a few hours, and then neutralize it with vinegar. Okay, I moved it down into the finishing room, making one final pass over the base with the maroon pad. And vacuuming off the dust, and then tack off the dust. Then I'm going to put some shellac on it. I'm going to put 4 or 5 coats on. I want to see what the color is before I do any staining on the top. Okay, after a few coats of shellac, I can see what the final color is. It's going to look fantastic. It's a nice original color. Now the next step is to finish the top. I want to match the top to the base. First thing I'm going to do is mask off the bottom. And I'm going to hit the top with 150 grit paper. Okay, after finishing with 150 grit paper, the wood has no color in it. So I've got to put the color back into the wood, and I'm going to start with the red mahogany dye and get the orange background color back into the wood. Okay, after doing the dye coat, I put 2 coats of shellac on. Now I'm scuff sanding with 320 gold. And I'm going to get ready to do some staining. I was testing out some different colors, and I came up with 2/3 mahogany and 1/3 walnut. And I'm going to do one final sample here. I put some of the red mahogany dye on a piece of oak plywood. I'm going to do one final test sample. And I'm going to go over and compare it with the bottom of the desk. And it looks like that's going to be right on the money. But first I'm going to do a little sample on the edge just to check. And it looks good. Now I'll go ahead and stain the whole top. Then once the stain's dry, I'll seal it with 2 coats of shellac. Okay, after putting 2 coats of shellac on, the color is just a little bit lighter. That's fine. It's better to be a little too light than a little too dark. I can always darken it up. So I decided to do a second coat of the same color stain, 2/3 mahogany and 1/3 walnut. I'm going over the sealed surface. This should get me really close to the final color. And it is. But it needs just a little bit of darkening. So I'm going to do a black glaze. This will bring me right up to the final color. Now I'm going to do another scuff sanding. And I'm going to fill in a few small little cracks with some soft putty. This is dark walnut soft putty. And then wipe it off with some naphtha. And then a few final coats of shellac. After the final few coats of shellac, now I'm going to wax it. I'm going to do a final scuff sanding on the whole piece. Then follow up with a gray pad. This is similar to 4-0 steel wool. Then vacuum up some of the dust, and then I reverse the vacuum to blow off the dust around the insides. Then wipe off the dust. Now I'm going to rub the whole piece down with the dark mahogany paste wax. And lastly is to put those little tenons back into place. I numbered them. Some of the numbers got obscured, but I could easily find out where they go. They can only go in one place. Now I'm going to scratch off some of the shellac, so I can put a little glue in the middle so to help hold it in place. Wow. This came out absolutely fantastic. As you can recall, I just cleaned the base and then re-shellacked it. And actually, there really wasn't any kind of a finish on the base. It was pretty much down to bare wood after I cleaned it. So it just had the original, I'm assuming, fumed oak color. In Mission Oak furniture, they fumed the oak to darken it. So I'm assuming that's what the color was. But then re-shellacked it, and it came out to a fantastic color. And of course, I had to do quite a bit of work on the top. Get that all straightened out, get the boards glued back together, and get it kind of flattened out. And then color matched it to the base, and got a dead-on match. And of course, got the knobs back on. Did a little repair to the drawer. Got those little tenons back on. Put a little glue on those and got those back on.